Welcome to Real Talk, a podcast offered by First United Methodist Church Pearland, where we strive to have real conversations about our real faith. I'm Pastor Thea, and today I'm joined by my colleagues, co-pastors, and friends, Reverend Reggie Clemons and Reverend John McClure. If you, gentlemen, would just reintroduce yourselves and tell us why you said you wanted to share your faith today.
Thank you, Thea, and hey, John. I'm glad to be here, glad to be able to have some real talk about faith, about how we feel, about the things that we truly believe. Currently, I've been at the church in Pearland for 24 years. Happy to be there, happy to be part of that. Love that church, love the people, always have. And I've kind of agreed for us to be able to do this, not only me personally, but as a church, because I think authenticity in today's society and certainly in our community is desperately needed. So thanks for doing this, and thanks for having me on again.
Yeah. Well, I'm John McClure, associate pastor at First United Methodist Church. I was excited to do this because of the topic. I mean, I think that's the number one thing. Relationships are a huge part of what we do as we share our faith, as we live out our faith in the world. And so I was excited about that. And I've never done a podcast before, so this is pretty fun.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about today, relationships and how and why they matter when it comes to faith. And I thought we could start with us each sharing how faith was introduced to your life and how relationships have been a part of that journey. So, Reggie, you want to start?
Yeah, I can start with that. Faith was introduced to my life at a very early age. When I say early age, I mean probably from birth. I've always been affiliated with some church or some aspect of organized religion. John will laugh because I love to tell the story about every other year I spent my summers in Longview, Texas with my grandmother, and we truly went to Pleasant Green Missionary Baptist Church every Sunday. I won't go into the other detail about that, but it was just a glorious experience, very small church, but very loving church. In Houston, I grew up in the United Methodist Church, in a neighborhood church, and having always been affiliated and associated with it, it truly is something that built a foundation for me, and I truly think that it's something that's needed, even if people make decisions later in life, it's not what they want. It's still something I think, particularly for children and young people, to be introduced to so that they can make their own decisions.
Well, I grew up in church, as Reggie was talking about. I really don't know if I can't remember a time where church wasn't a part of my life. Now, my parents being divorced when I was 3, my dad's his regular attending at a church was different than my mom's, of course, but in that, grew up in the United Methodist Church in Atlanta, Texas, and then also in the Baptist Church in Atlanta, Texas. So I kind of got both sides of small town. I guess theology would be the best way to put it. But in that, I would say probably some of the biggest, if you talk about relationship-wise, things that were like formative and things like that would probably be definitely the relationships I built at church camp, going to Lakeview, but then also being a part of a thing called Chrysalis when I was in high school. And that was really just men and women that were from the Emmaus community pouring into students. And so I didn't grow up with youth group being a part of any church that I was in, really. We had one that was run basically by students when I was in a little small town called Maud, Texas, but nothing like where there was a paid person on staff or anything like that to do students. And so I think that also goes in a lot of why, for the longest time, I've done student ministry.
Yeah. Well, I've shared my story multiple times. I didn't really grow up with a strong faith. Definitely no regular church attendance except my grandmother's, both my father's mother and my mother's mother. My father's mother took me to Catholic Mass every now and then, and my mother's mother took me to a Presbyterian church that had children's Sunday school and a children's message. And I remember feeling like, oh, okay, well, this is a place for me. There's something to do here. But those were sporadic and in between. I did have some friends in high school that were going to the Baptist church and loved it and invited me along, and I tried it and didn't feel really welcome, didn't feel really didn't really speak to me. And so just decided I don't need this. I had a nominal faith. I definitely believed that God existed. I believed that Jesus was the Son of God come to set us free, but I didn't really know what that meant. And for me, it was through relationships that I made actually overseas with some Christians in the Czech Republic who started to reveal to me that they had like a relationship with God. And I had never heard that idea, had never seen it, never experienced it. And I remember as they were willing to have a relationship with me and reveal that relationship they had, I began to want that and to even dare to dream it could be possible. Mm-hmm. That not only I could have a real relationship with these people, these good, God-loving people, but that the same good God would want to have a relationship with me. And it was then, it wasn't a Paul instant conversion. It was an ongoing of, I had this relationship with these people. Right. I began to form new relationships with new people. And the more that I was willing to show up to those human relationships, I felt like I was able to better understand this relationship that God was offering me and was willing to extend to me. And I wonder if there's something about this Jesus, right? This idea of God in the flesh, come to dwell amongst us, to live in our realm, to eat, sleep, live the life that we do, and how we see his life in connection, in relationship, how that really has maybe translated to you of this idea that relationships might mean something important.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, I don't know how much of an impact the whole concept of Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit had on me as a child as it relates to relationships. But I can truly tell you that I did feel that the church is where you actually were able to enter into really meaningful relationships. I can tell you today, even at my age, I still remember most, if not all, of my Sunday school teachers. And I can remember specific lessons and things that we did. I can remember the kids that I was involved in with. And at that time, particularly in Houston, being a large city, having a number of the same kids that you were in school with also in your church was something that was pretty important. And it actually happened a lot. So we were engaged not only in school, we were also engaged at church. And so remembering those and those relationships that were developed, some of those friendships I still have today from that standpoint. So I can truly tell you that it's not like osmosis, yet I do feel that one of the important thing about me understanding the value of relationships did take place because I was involved in a church setting. And that still has a lot of value to me.
Yeah.
I think I think the disciples is a big thing for me. I'll never forget being I think I was probably about a junior in high school when I came to the realization of honestly how screwed up the disciples were. Because you grow up, when you grow up, I say felt board all the time. You had the felt board with all the little things on it. And so you learned all the Bible stories that way. And so these were these people that were on pedestals. And I'm not saying they don't need to be put on pedestals, but it also continues to remind me how much we work on ourselves and still have room to go. And so the relationships that we have with one another and with Christ as we're going through continue to push us on to grow. I think that's the biggest part of it for me is just to take this motley crew of people and that be the chosen ones to carry it on and to follow. I guess gives you hope in a way, and also at the same time has the ability to sit and say, maybe sometimes we look in the wrong areas for people to pour into. Maybe we don't look out as far as we should. I think we have the ability to sometimes look through different lenses rather than the lens that Jesus would. And so I think when we do reach out, when we have those relationships, for understanding someone's worth is just being a creation of God, so you have worth. Like in those things, when you're able to pour into them in that, I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah. I love that you brought up, you said, like being the chosen, because I feel like the Chosen series offers this real glimpse of a real disciple as these real humans. And I remember one of the scenes that really got me was that all the disciples are together and Jesus is healing the crowd. And they start to bicker and to, well, you're this and you're that. And who do you think you are? And that was one of the first times that I realized, oh, they didn't all magically get along. They were so different. They had all been called mostly individually. A few brothers, right, came together, and they had been living, yes, they were all Jews, but they had been in the same area, but they'd been living different lives. And so you put these people together, and I do believe it's that idea of you rub up against each other, right, is actually where you become more discipled, having to deal with people who are different than you, who see God differently or experiencing God differently. But not only the rough edges, but like the soft edges too. Like back to my own experience, it was this softness, this relationship, loving, kind, nurturing, protecting, providing God that was revealed to me through these relationships with these other Christians that suggested to me that God was that way for me. And so I think it's kind of both, right? I really believe that it's through one another that God is revealed and reflected. And so if you are not having real relationships, getting close enough where both the sharp edges and the soft spots can rub up against you, then I think you're missing out on a deepening there.
Well, and I think that, the only thing I can say is the give and take that comes in relationships, because it is an aspect of learning all those edges that you're talking about of someone. And in that, you'd hope that you would grow and that some of those things would come out as well. I think that as we pour into people, we also learn about ourselves. I think that's been something that, especially in the last year, that's been interesting to me is that as new relationships have formed and as we've been able to, with Georgia being born, who's now 8 months old, I mean, there's a whole new section of people that we now interact with, whether it be at daycare or whether it be, and I think sometimes we take and we push off small conversations if they don't mean anything, when ultimately those can have effects on people's day longer than what you think, because it doesn't come full circle. So you've started it and then you have longer to think about it. And then when you come back, you're coming back with it too. So you don't get to see all those edges that you're talking about. You just get a glimpse of it. I think when you're able to be in a relationship closer, you get to fill all that out and grow together a little bit more.
Yeah. How do you see relationships, aiding in discipleship? We believe that relationships matter. We believe that we exist, our church, to build those relationships. Why is that kind of such a key, and even we could argue first step of a discipleship?
There's probably several reasons that are, you could pretty much say, I think are important. But one is the ability to be able to talk to one another and share with one another why you are where you are. And not only why you are where you are, but where you aspire to go. To me is a requirement that I have a willingness to sit down and be in your presence, which to me, relationships are a lot about presence, about being present with one another. I think that particularly as we look at this from a faith-based perspective, our ability to share and learn about Jesus and about God and about the Holy Spirit and what it does in our lives today is really based a lot upon experiences people are having today. and that they can share those things and they can share that witness with one another, which to me is what helps build and strengthen those relationships. I think that where we are right now is that there is such a feeling of isolation from so many different people that people think that I'm going through something and I'm the only one that's going through this and I'm the only one that's dealing with it and I haven't been able to find an answer. Therefore, there must not be an answer. I think relationships combat that and actually show that that's not even accurate. That's not true. That's one of those things that the devil does to make you know he exists, to truly allow you to see that you're by yourself and you're really not. So relationships help eliminate this isolationist attitude that we can sometimes have. Now, it's kind of interesting. We may take that to mean that if I am willing to be involved and willing to be present and willing to share that, then I'm going to always agree with this person and always get along with this person. And that's never happened. That's never happened in anything we've ever done. And it's not going to happen now from that standpoint. But I think what it does do is it opens ourselves up to be willing to do that, to truly be able to get along even if we disagree. And I think that's what's critical. At least that's kind of how I see it. So I can truly tell you that every relationship I've been in has not been good. They've not all been good. Some of them have been pretty bad, in fact, or whatever. But again, I think the willingness to say, well, I guess I could have taken the attitude, I had a bad relationship, therefore I will never have another one. And I think it teaches you that, we can get past that. There may be some things, people that we say, maybe it's best that we don't, for whatever reason, but that doesn't mean that I cut myself off from everybody. So, what do you think, John?
Well, I mean, the relationship side of stuff, I talk a lot about, especially with volunteers, earning the right to speak into people's lives. I think that there was a time where, especially in small towns, where the church was what everybody did on Sunday mornings. And, what are you doing? I mean, Sunday was kind of kept away from. Wednesday nights were kept away from. That's what happened. And in that, people would go and, people of the church could be trusted. Like, you did this, you did that. And that was kind of the church that I felt like I grew up in. I think as I've gotten older, like, I've realized that, especially students now that I work with, like, that's not exactly how they feel about the church. And I think that that's one of the areas that we talk about is that with this, they're not going to show up and say, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and you're sitting up in front of them, so because of that, all of a sudden you have this authority area. And I can say that's the church I grew up in. I mean, when someone showed up and they were the teacher, that's who you listened to. That's who you would show that to. And I don't necessarily know everything that got us there to where we are. And ultimately, I think that one of the things we talk about is that ultimately doesn't matter because it's where we are, right?
Right.
And so now when we talk, I'm like, okay, but did you ask them how their week was? Did you ask them what happened this week? There might be a reason this kid is on their phone with headphones in. They might have had a horrible morning. Like, why are they at the place that they're at? And let's start there, and then we can move somewhere else. People have bad days. We have bad days. I think that in those, when we talk about real relationships, we have to talk about real people. People are not robots.
Right.
And so in that, earning the ability to pour into somebody, I think happens in those relationships.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned too, I think that when you're willing to build a real relationship, you can see the reality of people's humanity. Then it actually moves the teacher from just a blank authority figure into a human being who might actually have had some experience with this topic that they're sharing about, right? And so kind of moves it out of a task and into reality. which I would argue is a really important piece of the work that we do, the work that we strive to do, as well as that we invite others into of hey, this is not about check off the boxes. We say that all the time. This is about revealing your real self in a way that others would see the real Christ in you, right? To see that God's real work in you when you're willing to reveal that. But what are the barriers that we put up? We, the church, we church leaders, we Christians, believers, people, what are the barriers and why?
I think you have to admit that it's hard. You know, what if people don't like you? Like, what if they're not willing to talk to you? What if they're not willing to listen? I mean, I've talked to Reggie about that. It still happens. Like, I'll write sermons and go back and just take and like, well, what if somebody takes this wrong? Like, and I think that I get to the point through prayer and everything where I'm like, God, this is what you want me to say. Like, this is where we are. And then those conversations that can come from that later on, like, are big. And so I think that sometimes we are our own worst enemies when it comes to these relationships. I will say that Amy Goodrow will be the first one to tell you that she's told me more than anybody to get out of my head. That's my mom. Because I'll overthink everything. I mean, you're laughing because you know it's true. Yeah. And I thank God for relationships like y'all's will sit there, you're in your head, or you're being too emotional. Those things. So I mean, I think that's part of it. Yeah. I think that's a barrier. It's sometimes us.
Oh yeah.
Well, and this may be a church thing or just a normal everyday thing, but relationships will expose your vulnerabilities. And we don't necessarily want to be seen as vulnerable. That lets someone inside of us, and we don't necessarily want that. I'd almost rather have this facade that you see me, that it's not necessarily who I am, but it's actually who I want to present myself to you to be. So I can do that if we are not necessarily close or don't actually have a relationship. Yeah. And it's almost acceptable to do that. But if we're going to have a relationship, then it's got to be deeper, and then I've got to allow you to truly see me really how I feel about things and how I look at the world, and how I have fears and concerns and other stuff that's always not very pleasant conversation. And again, particularly maybe I wouldn't have a problem if I'm talking to you about you, because I'm listening to you about you. But talking about me, that's where the fight got started, and where it got dangerous, right? So I think the church basically is going to certainly not only touch on that, the church is going to be about that because Jesus was about that. Yeah. So when you have that almost as a requirement, it's going to create some problems with some people. And then on the total 180 from that, it's like the thing that I think impedes relationships within the church is this whole air of almost authoritarianism, to where, well, not only do people want to look at us like we have the answer, but sometimes, unfortunately, sometimes we want to feel like we have the answer. And so if we do that, then that pretty much means that, well, I'm right, or you think I'm right, or whatever. Well, what if I'm wrong? Or what if it's not right? At that point, then that takes me away from being a person in the know or in authority or whatever. Now, personally, I certainly believe that Jesus was an authority or whatever. I think just based upon, like you were saying today, John, and we read and watched The Chosen, watch just about any movie you want to watch about Jesus, certainly you can see the disciples really weren't authoritarian figures. They were like you and me. They were trying to figure it out too. Yeah. And it's almost like if the church could just become this place where we were all just admit that we are all there trying to figure it out, then I think we could actually have greater relationships than we do. Yeah. But I think that we all come in with this stuff that we have to truly say, I have to have a certain amount of expertise or I have to be at a certain level to be able to be accepted. And I think that if there's any place that shouldn't be that way, it should be the church. Because the church should be getting us to a point that we know we come in there basically saying right off the bat, you are accepted by God. God truly has accepted you no matter where you are, how you are, no matter how worthless you may think you are. So if we're all there, then everything is up from there. Now, I think that's sometimes difficult because, honestly, institutions don't work like that.
Well,
So that becomes an impediment.
but I said this to somebody it's probably been about 4 months ago. And I think you talking about the institution itself. I mean, I think a lot of that's set by tone. And I think that more than anything, the tone, especially from leadership, has been that as we've gone through this, as we've gone through the last year or so. And I had somebody ask me, they were like, so, well, if you could have the church focus on anything right now, what would it be? And I was like, well, Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's the one thing I love right now is that everything we're talking about from the pulpit, as simple as it sounds, is focusing on that. And in that is your answer.
Sure.
I mean, that's the answer that we believe is going to change everything. And so in that, while you might not have all the answers and I might not have all the answers and Thea might not have all the answers, we know who does.
Yeah. I can't help but just realize, I think a lot of times we look at the cross as a sign of loss, grief, all sorts of things, right? The enemy's work, betrayal, all this. But it's such a sign of vulnerability. I was reminded in, one of my readings, the little cloth that we put around Jesus's waist on our crosses today, that's a cloth of kindness that we put, and so this actual symbol of vulnerability and and you see this in Jesus's entire life. His followers see him weep. He tells them he's hungry. He gets frustrated. Woe to you, he's so real, as well as, hey, God is like a daddy.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about this God. He's so vulnerable. And I agree that there's so often that our churches, our religious institutions are places where we feel like we've got to button it up, where we've got to present this perfect reality. And I just heard Francis Chan, a sermon this week from him. He said, no, why aren't we revealing our sins more? Why aren't we just putting it out there, broken and raw, and saying out loud to God and to one another, I need Jesus. I need this reconciliation, redeeming, resurrection over and over again, instead of constantly trying to prove we've already got it. And I think that is where those relationships are most important, right? Yeah. And to be honest, as a pastor, it's hard to find those places where I can trust that, right? I try and to be real and to be honest and to build those relationships and kind of say up front early, like, hey, just a human here, just a flawed human here doing the best that I can. And some days I don't even give my best, so that when I fail, right, no one's like, oh, they're just like, well, yeah, she's a human.
I think it's funny, when people find out that you're a pastor and maybe you've already had a relationship with them. That's not what you lead with. You're getting to know. And this, we're not church people. What does that mean? Nobody's talking about this. You asked what I did for a living. And so one of the things that I've kind of started, and I've got a couple of relationships right now that I'm just building, just that I've met through the years of being here. And I had a buddy of mine just tell me, he goes, well, me and my family, we're just not church people. And I go, someday I want to know what that is or what that means. But I don't feel like right now is the time to have that conversation yet. Mm-hmm. And this was 2 months into getting to know him. And so our kids do things together and everything. I feel like that there's that aspect of people look at anybody with the pastor like title and they look and go, oh, well, your goal in life is to make sure that I'm in your pew on Sunday morning.
Okay.
And I think I could speak for the table in saying that I don't feel like that's who we are. Mm-hmm. And in those things, just understanding that I'm just trying to get to know you. What's the saying of, preach the gospel everywhere you go and when you need to use words or when you must use words. Isn't that the goal?
Yeah. Yeah. To reveal this, for me, it's to reveal a redeeming relationship that Christ offers, that God offers through Christ. They think like, that's really my life goal. And this is the place where I get the beautiful gift to do that with most of my time and energy.
Sure.
And it is. And I tell people all the time, I'm a pastor for relationships. COVID really affirmed I am not called to a computer screen. This is driving me bananas.
You don't like Zoom anymore?
I really don't. It's not my favorite. Not my favorite. We shared, we had a meeting last week on the freeze, and I said, I'm having PTSD. We got to get off this thing.
The cold mist. Because
of the relationships, the real conversations, the way we show up authentically in each other's lives. That's why I'm a pastor. And what I'm hoping to offer, to lead by example, and to be in, right? I need those real relationships. I need those people to see all of me, to rub up against me with their sharp and their soft edges. I think we talked a little bit about vulnerability and getting out of our head, but what else? What else can we do to try and remove those barriers that, again, we've put up?
Well, you mentioned, again, the word barrier, the ability that we have to create pedestals is a barrier. And not only that we create them, sometimes people create them for us. I think John just pretty much set a great example. It's like you're sitting there trying to have a relationship with somebody and you got kids the same age, and so you're trying to get together. And then the minute you say you're a pastor, whoa, wait a minute, hold on. I didn't know I was getting into that. I'm not a church person or whatever. And so I think it's almost from the standpoint of what I've found since actually accepting this calling, which I ran from forever, but what I've actually found is that if I now say that, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm any different. It means people want to see me differently or feel differently about me. And I think that same thing ascribes itself to when people consider themselves to be church people, that people are going to see them differently and they're going to be differently, or you're going to be held to a higher standard. I'm not saying that that's totally wrong. I'm probably going to say it's wrong for the wrong reasons, though, because from the standpoint of it doesn't necessarily, again, make you better. It makes you basically be willing to profess that you're trying to be better. You're trying to do better. And that doesn't mean that the church is the only place you can do that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that what the church, though, is, again, going back to this place that we can come together to create these relationships where we all know we're all really working on the same thing, trying to get better. We're not even at the same levels in the church, even though maybe a lot of people think we are. We're not. There's certainly some people that have been in the church forever and some that got there yesterday, and we're all over the place in terms of different things we think and how we believe and view the world. So I think that it's important, though, that we try not to create these barriers to the truth and to barriers to learning the truth. I think creating a pedestal is, even in our church, we actually have different levels of where we preach from, or we do it different ways, and kind of depending on what the venue is and that kind of deal. And so even though we have that for sight lines or different other reasons, I've never wanted people to think that we create those so that, like I'm up here and you're down here, never from a perspective of speaking down to anyone, but really speaking to people from the perspective of, this is God's word. I say probably every other week that a lot of my messages, I'll tell people at the end, you know what, actually I got through writing this and I felt like I was preaching to myself because I needed to hear this probably more than you did. So I think that if, from a perspective of particularly the church, maybe religion altogether, but certainly in the church, that one of the barriers that we've got to try to eliminate, it is not altogether a set apart thing from the perspective that we got this figured out and you don't, because I assure you we don't. We're better and you're not. That's not what this is about. And in fact, that to me eliminates the whole understanding of forgiveness for the things that we may do. And it's almost like, and now let's just be honest, we all know that the church is sometimes its own worst enemy, particularly as it relates to grace and forgiveness. It's like, if I forgive you, then I get to judge you. And it's not about that at all, or it shouldn't be. It should be about the fact that God offers us the ultimate forgiveness. But even then, I've never read where God says, once I forgive you, you're never going to mess up again. In fact, I think God's willingness to be forgiven talks about how many times are you to forgive someone, which to me implies you're going to mess up again.
For sure.
So I believe that one of the barriers that we create is just the overall persona of the church and what the church ought to be.
Yeah. I love what you said about this set apart, and I always remind people that, yes, we have taken roles that are set apart, but they're not set apart from the rest of the believers. I would argue we've been set apart from the world to the believers, right? We're set up. It's not set apart from you.
Right.
I'm set apart to you.
Right.
Right. To be in real relationships and to reveal the realness of what God is really up to. What hopes do you have regarding meaningful relationships today, and how do we start to move there?
I think it's possibly just as easy as the fact of God continues to put people on our paths. As much as I talk about we're not church people, like, how cool is that we have a relationship because our kids are the same age? Like, just those doors that continue to be open and they're there. And I think the other piece is just, I am encouraged more and more by more pastors that I meet that understand the imperfections that they have and their willingness to not run away, but to lean into God's power in them. So understanding that those are areas you have to work on, understanding those are areas that God can show his strength in. And so honestly, I think that I get encouraged by seeing others, as probably corny as that may seem, as we're talking about relationships. I'm still fed more by relationships than I am anything, I feel. And I think I am able to set myself up in a good manner when I do those things, like my quiet time, and I get into the Word and I do that. And so I'm able to be at my best in those relationships. But those relationships feed me too. I didn't realize, as you were talking about, I didn't realize in COVID how much I would miss just walking into the church on Sunday. Because you got to remember, we left and Lily, my now 4-year-old, Lily wasn't even crawling, and she came back from COVID and was walking. Like, people didn't know who she was, like, legitimately. And so I think that just taking that blessing, that gift, and understanding it's there.
I'm extremely hopeful, and I'm extremely hopeful because I believe Jesus when he said, I have overcome the world. I believe that to my heart. I think that when we get to the points of particularly not having hope or actually having concerns about things, it is a lack of recognition that God is always going to do a new thing. It may not be the way we would want it done. And it certainly may not be how we would see it or what we would do if we were doing it. I think COVID is a prime example. There were some folks that because we weren't able to physically get together and because we had to go to these electronic means to do stuff, that pretty much thought this is the end of the church as we know it. This is the end of organized religion or whatever. And I'm like, I've never felt that way. I said, what we may need to do is just kind of sit back and wait for this new thing God is getting ready to reveal to us and how some stuff is going to be done. So one of the even things that I truly think that is a disappointment for people now is that, as you will hear in a whole lot of different venues, I wish we could do it the way we used to do it. And it's almost like this assumption that the way we used to do things was good for everybody. And it was not in a lot of cases. So I am always anticipating what God is getting ready to do next. Because again, Jesus does overcome the world. And at that point, that gives me a great deal of hope. And throughout that time period, when we understand prior to Jesus even being on earth and even throughout the history of the Gospels as we know them, and even into now, today, we have never lived in a world without relationships.
Right.
They have been different than we might want or how we would see them, but we've never not had them. So I have no reason to believe that we won't continue to have them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you said, John, about like noticing the people in your path. When you said that, I just immediately thought about how often Jesus was on his way somewhere.
Right.
And someone, from the disciples' perspective, interrupted him, but he was willing to see.
Yeah.
Right. And I also, and so I think about that not only with relationships one-on-one, like where do I have the potential to build a relationship? Who are some people that are in my path that I'm just breezing past, right? That I'm not even seeing, much less striving to build a relationship with. I also think about how when you said God is doing a new thing and COVID probably really solidified that reality, is that also Jesus never like commanded a crowd as in like, hey, let's get a crowd together. The crowds just found him, right? The crowds were already crowding. And so I also wonder too, like, not only can we be more aware of the individuals in our path, but maybe also be aware of the crowds. What are people gathering around? What are they showing up for? Where is their potential or already to build relationships? And how might we discover how God is moving there?
Sure.
Where is, I talk a lot about what I imagine it is like at the ball field, right? You've got these parents who are super passionate and committed about this thing with their kids, and they're showing up multiple days of the week. They're spending hours together, sometimes in the heat or the cold or the rain, but they're also talking. They're sharing their lives. They're building relationships. And who am I to say, because it's not happening in the venue I decided it should happen,
Right.
that God isn't there working, right? And that's not to say that the venues we have are not great. And where else is the Spirit moving?
Yeah.
And so I would agree that would be my hope and my suggestion of steps is like, start to see where this is already happening.
Well, and think about that when you start talking about that. If we were naive enough to say that the 3 hours of worship that we have on Sunday morning is the only place that people are going to connect. I mean, how the people that are inside the church spend more time outside the church than they do in. I think that the more, as I said, the more that we look and see, Reggie used the word, and it was the question with hope. I see hope in things when other people recognize things that I necessarily don't, and it makes me stop in relationships. Rhett, we were walking in through a store the other day, and I'm walking with my son, and he goes, "Hi, Miss Nancy," and and I'm like, Miss Nancy is also the crossing guard at his school. Rhett doesn't walk home. The only time Rhett sees her is when we're pulling into school, and she waves, and she does that. But he sees her in the school, like, during the day. She also happens to have a second job at a store. Because of that, I now talk to Miss Nancy every time I see her.
Yeah.
Right? I genuinely feel like if we viewed those little things as blessings in those introductions, like you talk about at the ball field, there are thousands of those every day between new people.
Yeah.
How much, just the connection of God's creation, how much joy could that bring? Just above and beyond hope.
Yeah.
Just joy.
Yeah. Any last words of hope you'd like to offer with someone who's struggling with this idea of real relationships or relationships with people of faith, with those church people?
Well, I think I just did. I think mine was, again, understanding that God is always going to be in the business of doing a new thing. Prepare for what he is going to do next. Continue to hold to the faith that we have and the reason that God did not create this entire universe that we live in to see it just go to ruin. He knew we were going to struggle because that's who we are. He knew we were going to individually struggle. But I think the fact of the matter is that we got to hold on to the hope that we have in Jesus, and the hope that we have that there are other people that are willing to help you in whatever your situation is. So I'm very, like I said, I'm more faithful and hopeful in that than anything I know right now because I've seen it happen. Mm-hmm. So I would truly tell people that if you truly struggle and don't know where to turn, come to a place where hope is our business and is what we do.
Mm-hmm.
I would just encourage everybody, not just people that are inside or outside, like just everybody. Doesn't matter if you're in a church. Don't assume. I think that we look at people and assume things every day. Mm-hmm. And how many relationships does that stop? You getting to know the real person. Taking time, as I said, just to get to know someone rather than thinking that you know who they are.
Yeah.
I think is probably the biggest thing, because if you don't, you're never going to be able to share anything with them.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I would argue too, not just assume assumptions about other people, but about yourself that, you are worthy to be known. You are worthy to have a real relationship with. You do have something good to offer, both sharp and soft edges.
Right.
I would agree. So, yeah. How can people connect with you directly if they're interested in learning more or talking about these real relationships?
Well, we are pretty much at the church most of the time. You can certainly stop by, call 281-485-1466, or go to our website, fumcpearland.org, where we can all be reached collectively and individually. Would love an opportunity to talk to anyone that needs to have a deeper conversation about stuff in terms of where they are and where we are. So that's pretty much how you get us.
Well, and I would say it's spring, so if I'm not going to be at the church, I'm probably going to be at Pearland Little League. So,
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you both for this real conversation. And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Real Talk. We look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, take care.
Yep.
Real Talk Podcast is produced by First United Methodist Church Pearland in collaboration with Pearland Podcast Studios, recorded here in Pearland, Texas. We invite you to check out our website at fumcpearland.org to check out additional events and opportunities for you to engage in real talk about faith and relationships.